Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Jennifer and I are talking about therapy, specifically why everybody needs therapy and why therapy is good for people. As we have mentioned more than once.
We mentioned a time or two.
Yes. Jennifer and I both have been, are in, will be again in therapy. And we are big supporters of therapy. Jennifer, why did we want to talk about therapy today?
Speaking for both of us, that we found it to be a very beneficial and healing thing in our own lives, but also coming from the aspect of being a feminist podcast and talking about all things that help women in their feminist pursuits. Therapy could be seen as one of those tools. And for me, it sort of boils down to therapy helps heal a person. Mm-hmm. And as I've said before, when one of us heals, we all heal. But in the healing of a person, it strengthens our families, our friendships, our work environments, which then trickles through to our community and everyone around us. So to me, that's why it's a feminist issue. Why do you think we wanted to talk about it today?
I think another aspect to it is that I think it's having agency over your own life and having agency over your health. And part of your health is your mental health and your ability to relate to yourself and your ability to relate to those around you and the ability to have a hand in your own healing. All of that is why it's a feminist. And as we've talked about before, access to therapy and access to healthcare in general is a feminist issue. Mm-hmm. If you don't have access to those things, you are prevented from being your full self and reaching your full potential. And you don't have the potential and the access to heal and be the best version of yourself. But it's not just a feminist issue. It's not just for women, as I should probably say. It's for everybody. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this.
Well, I think feminism is for everyone. So
absolutely.
Therapy being part of a feminist toolkit, therapy can also be for everyone.
Absolutely. I thoroughly agree with you. That makes sense. It's funny because I think when people think about therapy, and I think this is changing a little bit, or at least I hope it is, people usually think about therapy and they think, oh, you're broken. Oh, there's something wrong with you. And yes, often that is the case. Sometimes therapy is good for if you want to improve something about your life. It's not always, oh, I've got this big T trauma in my life and it's ruining my life and this is the only way that I can make it better. I mean, there's all kinds of other reasons to participate in therapy.
I don't think that I felt broken when I decided to go to therapy. I didn't even think I was in trouble. Mm-hmm. I just thought I could use some help.
Right. So for people who haven't heard us talk about therapy and why we're in it, can you say why you decided to start therapy?
I'm going to read a quote because I thought this quote really summed up why I wanted to go to therapy. And this is from an article actually that you sent me called "Here's Why Everyone, Even Happy People, Can Benefit from Therapy." And this quote is by Ryan Howes, PhD. He says, "Many people want more than to be not depressed. They wonder what they can do to be the happiest, most productive, most loving version of themselves." Mm-hmm. So for me, that really summed it up because it wasn't really about fixing. It was just more of, well, I'll tell you, I went to therapy several times as a kid. Mm-hmm. We went to family therapy with my mom, my stepfather, my brother, and my step siblings. And I thought that experience was a complete and utter waste of time, crazy crapshoot. I remember the therapist's name. I remember the dress she wore we saw her on Thursdays. I probably shouldn't say her name out loud. She wore the same dress every Thursday. That bothered me to start with.
Oh my goodness.
She was probably a very regimented person. What I didn't like about that therapy session was They brought the whole family into the room. Most of my siblings had headphones on the entire time.
Oh.
Yeah, and there wasn't anything really done about that, and, I was like that kid that was like, "Oh, yeah, they're doing this all wrong." I thought that during therapy at that point that my stepfather was lying. He was telling
Mm,
sort of a lie is probably big, but at the time as a kid, I thought he was lying. It wasn't really the truth of what was going on in our household. The one thing that I do remember that I thought was helpful, and it has stuck with me into adulthood. My brother was definitely in trouble. He was
mhm.
drinking a lot, alcoholism. And the therapist said that my brother was a barometer for what was going on with the family. So a lot of times people look at kids that have a lot of issues and they blame them. And basically what she was saying is he was the not the symptom, that's not the right word. He's like
Kinda like
the
the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, he was the one letting us know that there were problems, and I
Right.
remember that, and I thought that that was very intuitive of her, but other than that, I thought that therapy was a complete and utter waste of time. The second time I went to therapy was when I came home from the Peace Corps. They
Mhm.
offered some sessions for free to kinda help Peace Corps volunteers
Right.
reassimilate. I thought that was helpful. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but it did kinda help reestablish life in the US.
Okay.
And then this particular time that I decided to go to therapy, I was dating someone, and during one of our dates, his therapist called and said, "I can fit you in right now if you want to do a therapy session." And he did the therapy session with me in the room. And I
Oh,
actually talked to his therapist a little bit, and I felt a good connection with her. And I've always been a little leery with the connection. I thought that was good. And then also, I was feeling a whole lot of overwhelm about taking care of my mom.
mhm.
And I felt some of my reactions to her weren't particularly healthy, like the times that I screamed and yelled at her,
Right.
that I went kind of ballistic. And I wanted, I guess at that point, what I was really searching for were some tools to help me have better behavior while I was taking care of her. To be honest, we haven't really worked on that at all, but that's what I thought I was going to therapy for. And so I asked the person I was seeing at the time, did he mind if I hooked up with his therapist? And
Mhm.
she fit me in. I've been seeing her ever since. I will say this, every single week when it's time for therapy, I don't want to do it. I don't
Really?
wanna do it. I don't wanna go. I can think of every excuse why I should cancel it. I have not canceled one single time. I have gone to every single appointment. Most of the time, not every time, most of the time when I leave that room, it's a Zoom room. When I
Right.
leave my Zoom therapy, I'm very, very happy that I went. It's kind of like exercise. Like, I didn't
Right,
really
I was
wanna do it. I went. It seemed to be pretty good for me. Twice, I left ecstatic. The last
really?
therapy session I had, I was high when I left, not, high on drugs or anything. I was high on what I learned about myself.
High on life.
Yeah, I was high on life. But what about you? Why did you get involved?
Before I start with my story, I wanna point out something that what you talked about brought up for me.
Okay.
These 2 things are really important for people who maybe are considering therapy or have tried therapy before, but it wasn't quite right for them. 2 things. If you try therapy and it's not right for you, or you have a therapist that you don't exactly fit with, you can try a different therapist. Just because it doesn't work with one therapist doesn't mean it's not ever going to work for you, right? So I want to throw that out there. The second thing that I want to highlight is that even if it's not the right experience for you, you can still sometimes glean a nugget of wisdom from that. Like what you were saying with the therapy that your family went to when you were a kid, that you got that one nugget from it about your brother being the barometer for the family. Now, I started going because there was a lot of stuff going on with my family, some stuff with my mom and some issues that she was having, and they were affecting me. To be honest, they were affecting the rest of our family as well. I really wanted some help with that. I felt like it was having a really negative effect on me, and I needed somebody else to sort of guide me through it, and I mean, I guess even to let me know that it's okay, I can get through this. And like you were saying, I needed tools to work through what was going on. So I started going to therapy and it did help. I mean, it really helped me see the situation with new eyes, and it gave me the beginnings of skills and tools to cope with certain family issues and dynamics that were going on. I know it sounds really vague, but her story is not my story to tell, so that's why I'm not,
Well, for sure.
giving the details. Off and on throughout the years, I would go to therapy for here and there, like, oh, life is really stressful right now. I think I need, like I said, a guide through it. And that's kind of the way that therapy has felt for me throughout my life, is like having somebody to guide me through it and show me a different way of dealing with things. Because I don't know about you, but I didn't learn all of the coping skills, when, or at least not all of the positive coping skills growing up. So I had to learn them as an adult.
Honestly, Raquel, I feel like I've met very few adults who have learned those coping skills. Let's be for real here.
Okay, that's very true. I started going back to therapy maybe about 10 years ago ish. That sounds about right, because things were just in flux, in turmoil professionally, and I just felt like I wasn't handling it very well. I continue to go because I'm still getting benefit from it, but it's almost like it's a living thing for me because it has changed and morphed over time, and lots of issues have improved, and I've got, great coping skills for certain things, but now there's other things that I want to work on, or maybe that I've always wanted to work on, but I had to deal with the other stuff first. Yeah, and it's not, oh my god, my life is still falling apart, so that's why I'm still in therapy. No, life is actually pretty good in so many ways, and I've dealt with a lot of stuff, and I've learned great coping skills, and that's why I still do it.
Well, I think a big congratulations to you on that because that's huge. A lot of people
Thank you.
wouldn't do that for themselves, and that is a big part of self love or a big expression of self love. Let me ask you this: when you're like getting close to a therapy session, are you like me and you don't want to go, or are you like so good at it now that you're ready to jump in each week?
I'm at a point right now where I don't dread it. It's
That's
sort of
good.
just, but yeah, yeah, cheers. It's more of, I feel like I'm going in a different direction, or I need something different now from therapy that maybe my current therapist isn't really going to help me uncover.
Interesting.
So it's almost like, do you ever hear people talk about they go to a hairstylist and then they get to a point where they want to try somebody new, but they don't. And so they don't say anything and they just keep going to the same person for like years and years.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've been feeling a little guilty. Well, no, I've been feeling a lot guilty about it. I finally said something to my therapist about it. I just felt so awful. And I thought, and I just came out and told her, and I just said, oh, I'm so sorry, but I feel like maybe I need something else, that, a different perspective from somebody else, and blah blah. And she's like, that's okay. She had to reassure me that it was fine.
Did you feel
So
like you were breaking up with your therapist?
a little, well, yeah, I did. I felt so, just like I was betraying her, or what. I just,
I totally get it. We're totally, maybe not totally prepared, but we're prepared to break up with a boyfriend. We're not very good at this when we have like conflict with friends and we're ending a friendship or we're ending a even work relationships are kind of hard
mhm,
to end, and then the therapy relationship feels like a friendship but it really isn't. And
yeah.
then yeah, I get how that could feel awkward but maybe good in your growth that you're able to say that.
Yes, yes, everything that you just said, all of that. I'll probably still go to her, just not as frequently. Maintenance for my brain, maintenance for my emotions. Another thing that I have gotten out of therapy is that I know what I need to look for.
What do you mean by that?
When I first started therapy, I just knew that things were bad. I didn't know what I needed. I just knew that I was just in lots of emotional pain and I didn't know what to do with it. I felt like no one else understood or no one knew what I was going through, or I didn't know who I could talk to about things. And I thought, okay, well, then I'll go to a professional. At this point, I feel like I know what my issues are that I want to explore. And I have the language now to voice that. That awareness is partly due to age. And I think it's partly due to the experience of having been in therapy.
I don't know if I'm able to voice that completely. When I go to therapy, she always says, "Hi, how are you?" And then she's quiet and she lets me speak and I talk, 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 talk. I always have plenty to say. Sometimes I'm very shocked about where we go in the conversation. Last week, the week where I felt high, I had a very specific homework assignment. Lots of people helped
Mhm,
and you were one of the people that helped, and then there were people on Facebook and Instagram that helped and friends that helped. My assignment that she gave me was to identify some of my own needs,
mhm.
and she said when she gave me this homework assignment, if this feels very awkward in the beginning, that's normal, don't sweat it. And I was like, it feels horrible. What do you mean if it feels awkward? I was like, this feels awful. I hate this. I hate this assignment. This is yuck. I feel like terror in the, terror might be a bit strong, but I just didn't like it.
Yeah, it was anguish.
My whole body was like, I don't want to have to identify my needs. And it was really like 2 or 3 days where I couldn't think of anything. Sure, there's things I want, but is that a need? That's always been an issue for me like this. Do I really need it or is it just something I want? And I find as a human, found through therapy, that I have really suppressed the fact that I have these needs. Everything is just okay with me. Okay, okay. Anyway, I read through my list of needs and she was like, wow, I'm really impressed that you came up with these things. And one of them, the first one that was kind of shocking to me, is I was out one day and I was walking my dog, and I've noticed lately the last couple weeks my dog has been agitated,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh yeah, it's the owner's responsibility to take care of the dog. A lot of people think they get the dog because the dog will like protect you. But really, when you're walking the dog needs you to protect them, or at least to feel like you're protecting them. So I
Oh.
learned a lot about, like, if a stranger is approaching, you stand in between the dog and the stranger. You say to your dog, I'm taking control. It's not
Mm.
the other way around. So I'm learning all this about the dog, but I've noticed in the past couple of weeks my dog was being agitated. So I thought to myself, my dog must need some soothing.
Right.
She needs some calm down. And then my head just went, yeah, my dog needs soothing, my mom needs soothing, my kids need soothing, everybody in my life needs soothing. And then bam, I was like, you need me.
Mhm.
I need self-soothing. And once I soothe myself, then my dog, my mom, my kids, they will all chill, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it was like, and so to me, that was like the hugest thing on the list. The second thing on my list was I said, I need connection, but I have
Mhm.
lots of connection, right? I have kids and family, and my life is very full in that regard. Like there's never a slow moment around here.
Yeah.
But I said, but this is specific connection. I need connection with an adult human, preferably a male, like a
Mhm.
romantic relationship.
Right.
Not 100% sure I'm ready for that right at this moment, but this is what I'm working towards. And I was like, I need it to be a different connection than I've experienced in the past. I need a real connection. And she said,
Right.
I'm so surprised that you figured that out. She was like, this is like an A plus because that is the thing. And I'm so surprised that it's on your list. And then
Wow.
we talked about it and talked about all of my dating patterns, why they were sort of surface level
Mhm.
instead of really digging deep. And then we talked about, she brought up stuff from previous sessions that I had told her about childhood. And she said, don't you see, like, your dating pattern is you date someone who's not really 100% available to you. They're not giving you your full
Yeah.
attention. They're not taking care of your needs. They're not connecting. But your end game is to write a different story than you wrote with your parents. You want to change the ending. So you're chasing people that are not really available in order that you can change that and prove your worth. And I was like, holy fuck, I don't want to do that.
Wow.
Like, seriously, I was like, it's not that I haven't dated people that want to spend time with me. Time is available. Like, they will go to events and be present, but they won't connect on the deeper level. I'm not blaming them. I was
Yeah.
refusing to connect as well. So there's two people looking at each other that are like a mirror,
Yeah.
refusing to connect, wondering why they don't have a connection.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. That, yeah. And that's deep.
And there was this list of things, but that was the one she was like, I would have never guessed you would have figured that out yet. And it was like,
Wow.
I win at therapy. I win, I win. I did my work. I did my work. So that's why I was high.
And that's huge though.
Yeah.
You had this epiphany.
I didn't go into that therapy session expecting that result. That's what I find to be so valuable about a person who's outside of your life, different than your friends, different than your
Mhm.
mentors, different than your family members. A person who's outside and doesn't know you, they only listen to what you tell them. They
Mhm.
connect the dots for you and help you put it together.
Yeah, and they're completely objective.
Right on. And they
Yeah,
call you out a
completely.
little bit on your bullshit. Like a few
Oh,
times,
yeah.
she's like, no, 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 I don't think that's what's going on here. Think again.
Yep. One thing about therapy, at least for me, is it's a safe space to express my negative emotions.
Oh, yes.
I can be yeah, I can be bratty, I can be a bitch, I can express my anger and my frustration, I can cuss like a sailor, I can completely blow up and be a big brat and just say, "Well, I'm done. I'm just this isn't working for me," or "I'm angry," or you know what? I mean, I can literally voice all of that and not think this person's not going to love me anymore.
Well, I'm going to call you out for a second because we've talked about
Okay.
this several times. All those things you mentioned, why are they negative?
Because society tells you that they're negative.
Society's wrong.
Society messes people up, man. But thank God for therapy.
That's why everybody needs it, because society is big time working fast to get you all messed up.
Yeah. Yeah. So find a therapist, people.
We have all these negative connotations on the emotions, and that's why we tend to not feel them, shove them down, not pay attention to them. But if
Mhm.
we stopped calling them negative, like, what does bratty mean? You said 3 times I was bratty. What's bratty?
I can be, I guess, childish.
So why
I
is
can
that
be,
negative?
well, true. I can be petty.
So
I can be judgy.
so
Those are the things that, again, society tells you those are not the nice things. Those are not the
okay,
good
but
things.
if you're feeling all those things, but you won't voice them, you won't acknowledge them, you won't think about them, what are you doing with them?
Shoving them down.
And then what happens?
And, well, then it just comes out in being short with people or snappy or easily irritated, or it's a fine line between having a filter so you don't say mean things and hurt people and shoving it down and just not dealing with it.
That's why therapy is a safe space. So you
Yeah.
can practice having these feelings in appropriate ways, but also you need to say something that's not appropriate. You can say it in therapy.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
You know what
Mhm.
else she really helps with, Raquel?
Yeah.
So I told you how I found out that I'm this person that's always like, it's okay, everything's fine, no worries, I don't have any needs. We'll go to eat wherever you want to eat. I don't care. I don't have a choice, whatever. she helped me to realize that some of these random stories when I was growing up,
Yeah.
like her facial expression will be like, "What?" And I'll be like,
Really?
"Oh, was that was that not normal? People don't do that in their families?" Like, that's not what everybody experienced? And she had to let me know that some of these things are just not right. Some of these things that I experienced are like, that wasn't okay. Like, it
Oh,
happened, and you
right.
had to live through it, and you
Right.
had to come up with defenses, and you had to survive as a child, but that wasn't right,
Mhm.
right? That wasn't the way it's
Mhm.
supposed to be. You weren't treated appropriately. That was wrong, and I
Mhm.
had to hear that from her
Mhm.
in order to understand that, because even though I kinda knew it, I needed someone to tell me that that was not right.
Right.
And I don't think a friend could have told me that it wasn't right.
Or even if a friend could have, you may not have been receptive to it.
I needed the professional who is a therapist to say, "Dude, that's whacked.
Yeah.
What your family did was whacked. What your
Yeah.
family did was weird. It wasn't right. It was selfish. It was self-absorbed. It wasn't right."
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and sort of going back a little bit, society, yeah, society tells us as women that certain things are wrong or not right or not appropriate. Society does the same thing to men. Therapy can be really powerful for men too.
Yes.
It's not just, oh, you're weak, you're broken, you're, I don't know, whatever. I mean, you can even go to therapy if you want to be a better father, work through professional issues, try to figure out even what you want to do in the
How to
next
date
phase of your life.
how to date an
How
amazing
to
woman like me or you.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, how to be better for yourself. I mean, all kinds of things. So, I'm curious, what are some things that you have learned from therapy that have been really impactful for you?
Learning that some of the things I do as an adult that I
Mhm,
think are protecting me are actually mechanisms that I created as a child. And they
mhm,
did protect me, but they no longer
mhm.
serve me if I want to create the life that I want to create.
Absolutely. Put that on a pillow.
I
Amen.
think, again, I think a lot of these things that I learn at therapy, I already kind of know it, but I
Mhm,
don't know how to voice it. And I find this may be my personality. I really need someone to validate for me. I
mhm,
need someone to say, yes, that is correct.
mhm,
Funny enough, I really wanted some tools to deal with my mom, and we haven't
mhm,
really talked about that at all. But as I've sort of worked on my own shit, like my not bad behavior, my create my how can I say it without
behavior that served you well as a child, but weren't serving you well as an adult in your current situation.
well, I'm thinking more of like my yelling behavior at my mom. As I've done more
Okay,
work, I haven't
okay,
wanted to like lash. I've been more patient,
right,
um,
right,
that kind of thing. So
okay,
I did learn that I need a sounding board. I need
mhm,
someone to shoot ideas off of. I needed to acknowledge that I did have trauma in my childhood. Trauma is a pretty big word. So I think a lot of times people,
mhm,
I'll just speak for myself. I think that I thought in
right,
order to use the word trauma, you have to be raped or you have to, like, your house has to burn down
mhm, right,
or someone has to be kidnapped. But I
right,
did have a lot of trauma growing up and trauma from divorce and adults in and out of my
right,
life. And then also my brother and sister both died. So acknowledging that I actually did have trauma and
mhm,
I have responses because of that trauma that I would no longer like to have. So working on that. This is a big one, that perfectionist word. I would have never described myself as a perfectionist because I see a perfectionist in my head as someone
Mhm.
who has everything in the perfect spot in their home and everything's neat and tidy. And but the perfectionism for me runs more like I want everyone to be happy with what I do. It's really
Right.
important to me that people like me, and that one of my issues with boyfriends, I'll get back together with them because I don't want them not to like me. I want them to
Yeah.
still think I'm a good person. Like, why is that so important to me? You're breaking up with this person. Why do I need them to think I'm a good person? I
Right.
really don't. But part of my childhood trauma led me to need these people to feel like I'm a decent person.
Right.
And I guess I don't really need that. I'm still working on that one because I feel like I still need that, but I'm trying to let that go.
And you may work on that for a very long time, and that's okay too.
That one runs pretty deep with me. I have kind of learned that therapy is for everyone. At least I believe it is.
Mhm.
Because again, I'm going to go back to I think a lot of us do a lot of things in unconscious patterns. And
Mhm.
I've already uncovered a few of mine. I would like to keep uncovering them because I don't want to do things as a reaction to little Jenny at 6 years old. I want to do things from the power of who I am as a woman right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I've learned. What have you learned?
Well, it's funny that you talked about recognizing patterns because that's one thing that I've gotten from therapy is recognizing when I'm falling back into old patterns.
Yeah.
For instance, catastrophizing things or talking about the entire world is just going to fall to pieces. To be able to recognize when I'm doing that and
Yeah.
not just to recognize it, but to stop myself.
How do you stop it?
And I do that by problem solving, by trying to figure out, okay, if this worst case scenario happens, well, then what am I going to do? How am I going to react? How am I going to solve that situation? And then I think, well, okay, what can I do here to prevent this, that, and the other thing? Right. It's almost like I'm proving to myself that I'm going to be okay. It'll all get worked out somehow, and that I'm not helpless, and that there are things that I can do. Those thoughts, those steps, I guess, or the realizations, those are huge for me because it's so easy for me to fall into, well, this thing happened. So, oh my God, that means that, X, Y, and Z are going to happen and I'm going to end up living in my car. When I start thinking that way, it's easier now for me to see when it's happening and then to pull myself back
Yeah. Yeah.
from
Yeah.
and going all the way over the deep end. It's easier for me to recognize those things now and to know it's not true. Depression is lying to me and it's making me not every thought that you think is true.
And that makes me really think about a lot of the things that we tell ourselves. That
Mhm.
just because we hear it in here in our head and it's our own
Mhm.
voice doesn't mean it's true.
Exactly. Sort of tied with that is me learning to have compassion for myself. This is a work in progress and I'm better than I was, trust me. But that's a continual having compassion for myself. It's easier for me to have compassion for myself in certain areas of my life than in others, but it's a work in progress. That was never even on my radar years ago. Never even a thought before. So that's a huge one for me. I guess all of this is just sort of examples of coping skills that I've learned. I've learned some over time, some I've learned recently, some I learned years ago. Maybe some I would have learned anyway, but it probably would have taken me a lot longer to learn them. Being able to recognize the thoughts when they're there, the thoughts that don't serve me, learning how to be nicer to myself, learning how to care for my inner child, like what you were talking about with little Jenny, like me learning to listen to and care for little Raquel. Another thing that I've learned, and this is huge. This is really, really, really big for me. For the longest time, I just felt like I was just struggling. Like that's all I was doing. I was just struggling for years and years and years, decades, decades, decades. I was just struggling. I was just surviving. I would get up, go to work, come home, go to bed. It literally was just like that's all I'm doing in life is I'm just surviving. I was in that for so long that I really wanted to learn how to thrive.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Heck
And
yeah.
so and so I mean, I remember saying to my therapist, I want to know what it feels like to feel like I'm thriving and my life is thriving and in whatever shape that takes. But I don't know how to get there. How do I get there?
Mhm.
How do I figure that out? That took a long time. That was some deep, 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 deep work. And I'm not saying that thriving equals I've got all the money and I've got the jewels and there's more to thriving than material
For
things.
sure.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, I think maybe intellectually I realized it, but I didn't know how to get there. And I think for a long time, I didn't think it was even possible for me to get to that point. Therapy helped with that. And I think there's so many people who are going through the same or some version of that where they're like, yeah, I go to work, I come home, I have dinner, I go to bed, and I do the same thing all over again. And they're like, nah, life is fine. I've got a roof over my head. Who am I to want for more?
Right.
Who are you not to want for more? We all should have joy in our lives and be able to feel and learn and reach for thriving. That was a huge shift for me. I mean, I'm probably still working on it. Another thing that I've learned from therapy and from all of this is I'm going to be okay. I mean, it's doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to be okay. And I'm not in it by myself. That I don't have to do it all by myself. I can rely on other people. I can lean on other people. Those are probably the biggest things that I've taken from therapy or that therapy has helped me unearth in myself and having the confidence in myself that I'm going to be okay.
Man, therapy, what a ride.
Right?
What would have happened to you if you hadn't have done it and you would have just decided that existence, that monotonous work to home to work to home was good enough? And my thought is, well, first, what's your thought if you hadn't changed?
I would be very unhappy, profoundly unhappy. Like, have
Okay.
you ever looked at somebody and the person was pleasant and nice and whatever, but there was just the spark wasn't there?
I see a couple of things when I'm out walking around. You used to see people walking to and from work that were just sort of in a daze. They're not really smiling, but they're not really frowning. They're just sort of and they're trudging through life day after day. Now you see it, but they're all staring at their cell phone.
Mhm.
They're walking, 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 staring at the cell phone. It's one screen to the next. It's to work and back. We all do that to some extent. We all disassociate to some extent. But how much of our life do we not want to live? And that's it. If you hadn't have gone to therapy, how much of your life would you not have lived? Same for me. Ours is different. I can clearly see after having this discussion how ours is different. For whatever reason, I was born knowing I was going to be okay. I've known that
Mm,
my whole life.
mm,
I don't know
mhm.
why, because I've
Yeah.
been through some crazy shit, and it should be like, "Why did I know I was gonna be okay?" Some people call that faith. Some people have told me that that is why I do believe in God, even though I say I'm an atheist, because I've always known it's gonna be okay. I
Yeah.
think since I've gone to therapy, even though I already had a great relationship with my kids, I think the connection has gotten deeper. My
Mhm.
relationship with my niece has changed. My relationship with my nephew has changed. I'm trying to reach out to my dad in different ways than I've done before. None of these are the romantic relationship that I'm working on, but these are really human relationships. My relationships
Mhm.
at work, trying to be extremely authentic in the workplace, that is not an easy thing. That is no
Mhm.
easy task. But I think
Amen.
I think in our ultimate pursuit of happiness is really the ultimate pursuit of authenticity. If you can't be authentic, how happy can you be? And if
Mm,
you made up all these things in
true.
our childhood about protecting, what do they call it? There's a word for it. I think it's masking. When you go into a certain situation, you leave parts of yourself behind. I think we do it as women. I was the master of masking when I was a child because my parents were divorced
Mhm.
and we had two separate households that ran completely differently. So my brother and I just told my therapist about this week. My brother and I were completely different kids at my mom's house than we were at my dad's. We put on
Wow.
a different persona when we walked into the house. My brother had a really hard time with it. That's why he was the barometer. He would explode. I
Mhm,
just said, it's cool. Everything's fine. It's all good. No need to worry. We came up
mhm,
with ways to work around it, but that's not authentic. That's
mhm.
masking to be in two different locations. We were master mask as children. That's
Yeah,
crazy. Then
yeah,
my therapist said, that's not right. You weren't supposed to have to be master mask.
yeah, I mean, same,
You
same.
feel
Oh, yeah, I mean, there was so much going on at home that I did not talk about. I
you
just
see
did
that
not.
hot.
Yep, and I would be at school, and, like, school was my safe place. It was also the place where I would wear a mask at school, you know? I wouldn't tell what was going on at home. I wasn't my authentic self.
Is anybody when they're
No.
I mean, you're going through adolescence, you're in with a
Yeah.
bu and
And you
kids
don't
can
even
be
know who you are
right. So,
fully.
I mean, is anybody completely themselves at school?
Maybe not.
I don't know.
Maybe not. Yeah. Hey,
I
at
mean,
least not at 13.
it's a terrifying place because, okay, you decide to wear a certain style of clothes.
Mhm.
People ridicule you, make fun of you. At that point, we're trying to figure out who we are, kind of.
Yeah. So, we're getting to the end of the year but when this airs, it'll be January. Everybody's talking about resolutions, which I don't like resolutions necessarily, but I do like goals. I set goals for myself all the time. It doesn't necessarily have to do with a specific time of year. And this sounds initially like this doesn't connect with what we've been talking about. What goals do you have for the near future? And this is the connection. How has therapy affected the goals that you set, how you articulate those goals?
Yeah, that's a great question, Raquel. I am one of those people that always does New Year's resolutions, or I did for a long time.
Mhm.
And I moved on to dream boards, which I created for years with my kids. And then last year I did the priorities board where I really worked on what are my priorities this year. And
Right.
last year, my priority was self love, my number one priority, and
Mhm.
one of the reasons why I got into therapy.
Mhm.
So I have been thinking about resolutions, goals, priorities for next year. I've been thinking about it a lot, as people
Mhm.
probably do as the year closes in. A lot of the priorities that I set last year will remain priorities for me this year. Self love, my
Mhm.
relationship with my girls, it's still a priority. The other goals that I have are around the podcast.
Mhm.
I would like to continue to develop this podcast with you, build our audience, and see if we can get some sponsors and sell some
Yep.
stuff, start to see it flourish.
Yep.
I have a book that I want to write still. I'm getting closer on idea. I mean, I have lots of ideas and I've got lots of
Right.
stuff on paper. One thing I did realize through that journaling
Mhm.
episode that we did,
Yeah.
one thing I realized is that I have been trying to write the book on my computer. I write much better on paper. I don't want to have to do that
Right.
because I don't want to have to write it and then write it.
Mhm.
I flow so much better freestyle in a book with a pen
Mm.
and a paper. So
Mm.
I think that one of my goals will be this year to buy myself a really pretty, I just already picture it in my head, really pretty black covered, like a hardcover journal
Mhm.
to write the
Yeah.
novel. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like
So
that.
that's formulated in my head. And then I don't want to talk about it too much on here, but my work has been evolving. What I
Mhm.
was doing in the past changed when COVID came. Still work for the same company, still love my job, but now I'm very much focused on training and development and guest experience. So I
Right.
want to get better at just like pumping that out.
Good.
So, what about you? What have you thought about for your goals?
Well, I mentioned going from survival mode to thriving.
Yeah.
And my goals are very, very closely tied to that.
Mhm.
Definitely with the podcast, want to continue. I want it to grow. I love doing this with you. This is something that brings me so much joy and pride. And this, what we have created and what we are doing, this feels like the personification of thriving for me. The fact that I took a chance and we're doing it, that's huge for me. I didn't keep listening to the negative voices saying, I stopped listening to it. Yeah, whoop, whoop. Definitely everything with that, reaching out to more guests, reaching out to more of the guests that I'm nervous to reach out to. Or I think, well, that person's too big for me to reach out to. No, they aren't.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, the worst they can do is say no. Okay. No won't kill me,
Or they
right?
might say not yet.
Right, right. Yes, exactly. Another thing is, and I remember as a little kid thinking this, but I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to talk about? I want to write a book,
Yeah.
but I want to write almost like a book of essays. So, as opposed to a novel or no, I mean, there's so much that I want to delve into and talk about and express that, yeah, yeah, there's a book in me and I just need to get it out. Another thing is I want to continue to learn how to not just be compassionate toward myself, but to continue to learn how to love myself well.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Top of the priority list.
Right, right. And in that learning to love myself well, for me, includes not settling for things that stand in for love. And okay, yeah, that means dating and it's in that realm but it's also in non-romantic relationships.
Yeah.
And to know when something is a stand-in for love and when it's really love. And yes, that includes non-romantic as
I
well
think it
because
includes food.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It includes all of that and love for myself and feeding myself well.
Or what I meant was eating food that you love and not eating things that are just okay. Like, okay, I've got
Yeah,
this, so I'll eat it. We don't have to do
yes.
that.
Yeah, we don't have to live by that.
No, we don't have to eat stuff we don't like.
And another thing, and this is pretty specific, I want to I want to learn more about finance. And I've been doing that lately, like over the last maybe year. Like I've taken webinars and I've started following certain people on Instagram and basically trying to get the information. I feel like I'm a sponge right now about learning more about money and finance and investing and making my money work for me. I mean, I've spent my entire adult life working hard to get money. Sometimes it wasn't very much money, but working so hard to get it. But then I didn't know how to then make that money work for me as well. And again, this is going back to that whole learning to thrive in life. I think everybody knows by now, I'm the nerd in the group. And I like learning things just for the sake of learning them. This is a huge thing for me because money can be a very emotional thing.
Mhm.
And finances can be very emotional. It can be very scary. And they
Mhm.
have been for me for probably most of my life. I don't want it to be scary anymore.
Mhm.
So so
Bravo.
that's another thing. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, therapy has had a huge effect my goals are at this point.
Mhm.
So thank God for therapy.
I think therapy sort of rounds out the goal making. Like, I don't know if therapy helped me set the goals, but it helps me to talk about that stuff with my therapist because when she knows those are my goals, when I'm sort of getting off track with it, she
Mhm.
me in a little bit. Like, she'll say, well, how does that work for you? Like, what is it doing for you? What are you, and she can easily point out my bullshit in that that's not really self-love. You're not really taking care of yourself. That's not what you said before. And
Right.
she does. And I need to be called out sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's good.
We all do,
Hmm.
you know. As we're talking about this, I really want to know from our listeners what some of their goals are and what their experience has been with therapy or thinking about therapy or maybe trying therapy is a goal of theirs,
Mm.
which could then flourish and grow and develop into all kinds of other goals.
Hmm.
But I really would love to hear from other people about how this is landing for them, how this is making them think about all of this, if they're having conversations with other people based on this conversation. I really want to hear from our listeners. So listeners, please, please, please reach out to us and let us know. This is a good discussion. I'm glad we
Yeah.
talked about this today. I think we covered it all. I really do.
There is one thing that I did want to talk about
Okay.
for people considering therapy, or what a lot of us tend to do, trying to get people in our life to go to therapy.
Hmm.
Probably won't benefit if you are forced to go. Need to be ready. I think that maybe that was part of the issue with my family long, long time ago. Maybe some of those family members didn't want to be in that room. That's why they put on the headphones. That's why they didn't participate.
Hmm.
Maybe you'll still hear something that's helpful. Maybe it will still ring some bell, but I don't think you can force someone to go to therapy.
Yeah, you absolutely cannot. You cannot force somebody to do it. On the flip side of that, if you go to therapy, listeners, and you are really excited about it and you're making progress and having breakthroughs and all the things, that's cool. Talk about it, share with people, but don't be an evangelist about it. Like don't try
I
don't
guess.
try to change people. If they
Like
aren't ready, they're not going.
like me and you who say everybody needs to go to therapy?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's funny. I think we're just trying to let people know what it's done for us,
Yeah.
that they may feel better if they're on the fence
Mhm.
about wanting to go. I don't know.
Yeah, and hopefully taking some of the stigma out of it.
Well, by the time this airs, we'll be in the new year. So happy 2022 to everyone.
Happy New Year! Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.